to another installment of Wilderness Wednesday. If you notice anything different, I have this hair pick in my hair. This hair pick has become my best friend over the quarantine. I have now determined that haircuts or barbershops are essential businesses. We need to get back to cutting hair again because I can't take this anymore. If you've been with us from the beginning, you've seen my afro continue to fro. If we go any further, I'm going to be able to shake it for the camera. So welcome back. If you've been joining us for each installment of Wilderness Wednesdays. If this is your first time, then welcome. We're glad to have you. If you're checking out the Cleveland Church for the first time, then especially welcome. We're glad to have you. We're glad to help kind of guide your thoughts through this quarantine time, to this really unsettling time in world events. Our Wilderness Wednesdays, we've been going through looking at different characters in the Bible, how they kind of thrive through their wilderness, their quarantine, and we're in a different type of wilderness. We're in a quarantine wilderness, a shut-in wilderness that we have to endure forever. Not forever. It feels like forever. So at least for me, it feels like forever. This is our fifth installment. This is how I, in fact, keep track of how many weeks we've been in the wilderness, in quarantine. This is number 5, so this is the 5th week. So we've been in quarantine for 5 weeks, because I have lost track of all days. You could tell me that it's December, I probably wouldn't know if I didn't look out my window. But here we are. So we're gonna dive in here. Go ahead and if you have a Bible or your phone or your computer, go ahead and turn to Psalms 142. And what we're going to do this Wilderness Wednesday is we're going to look at one of the most famous characters to endure a period of being in the wilderness, and that's King David. And King David, a little backstory before we get into the scripture here. King David, his story in the Bible is fairly famous. If you're not familiar with the Bible, you probably know who David is anyway. He's the one that slayed Goliath. He slays Goliath and gets in the good graces of King Saul. Saul appoints him a general in his army, and David thinks he's in the good graces of Saul, or so he thinks, until Saul finds out that David is to be appointed king, that he's the rightful king of Israel. And then Saul is not too high on King David for fairly obvious reasons. And what you see in the scriptures is that Saul's chasing David all over the wilderness, and David is hiding in caves, and he's got men that are with him. And there's one instance where he's in a cave, and Saul's there kind of relieving himself, and he's like, "Oh, I got the chance here," and he doesn't take it. David, a lot of David's early life can be described as running around trying not to die at the hands of Saul. And while in this wilderness, David pens most of his Psalms. So while David is running for his life, hiding out in caves, most likely eating, locusts and wild honey, David is writing some of the most vulnerable scriptures in the Bible that we have. He's continually pouring out his heart to God. And today we're going to look at one of the more vulnerable passages that David writes in Psalms 142. In Psalms 142, if you're reading from a Bible, it says it in the little blurb right under. It says when he was in a cave, David, when he was in a cave, and it says, "I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him I tell my trouble. When my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way. In the path where I walk, people have hidden a snare for me. Look and see, there is no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. I cry to you, Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they are too strong for me. Yet set me free from my prison, that I may praise your name. Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me. We find David here, as it says in the little blurb, in a cave. We find him in a cave crying out to God. He says it himself, I'm crying out to God. We find him in a very vulnerable moment. David's situation, his running away from Saul, is a lot like ours, right? David is subject to the whims of another man. Saul has lost his mind. He's chasing him around, and David really doesn't have a lot to do with it. Like he's just living his life, and God's told him that he's supposed to be king, and that's how it's gonna be, and that's life. And then Saul gets upset. Now he's being chased around the desert. There's nothing about this that was in David's control. He didn't cause Saul to chase him around. It was completely out of his control. And what happened is David had to go about completely cut off from society, completely cut off from most of society, right? He had a band of guys that were traveling with him. And for us, we are kind of in a wilderness as well, right? We're in a quarantine, a shut-in quarantine, but a lot of this is outside of our control. A lot of it, all of it is outside of our control. Unless you were the person that ate that bat in China, then this is your fault. But for us, being locked inside or being cut off, or if we're sick ourselves, none of this is in our control. And we're just living our lives until one day here comes COVID-19, come to lock us in our houses and take our jobs and quarantine us from the outside world. This is not in our control. And we see David, in this situation, we see David, we don't get all of David's life, but we get most of these Psalms where David could have felt sorry for himself. And in a lot of the Psalms, we do see David feeling a little bit sorry for himself. But what David always does is he always comes back to God. And where we see David here in Psalms 142 is we see David's utter reliance on his need to pray. We see David crying out in a vulnerable state, crying out to God, to the only person that could save him from a situation that is so far outside of his control. He's crying out to God who can save him. We are, as I said before, we're in a wilderness, and this wilderness can spark a lot of emotions. I know I've had quite a few emotional whiplashes back and forth of at first this was awesome. I get to stay on my couch for a few days, and it could be awesome, and the next moment I'm feeling depressed, like, oh my gosh, I'm staring at the same walls every day. This time in quarantine can bring out a lot of emotions, a lot of emotions, a lot of emotional whiplash. It can bring out a lot of feelings of fear and self-pity and depression. Like, all of these things are real, and they're happening. They're probably happening to you. They're happening to me. I wish this was over. I wish I wasn't looking at the same walls over and over again. I love my apartment. I don't know what's gonna happen. I may never return home after this quarantine ends. But this time can bring out a lot of emotions. And what we see David do in the Psalms, and especially in Psalms 142, is we see him bring all these emotions to God in prayer. We see him just laying them all out to God, no matter what they might be. We get David in earlier Psalms saying, God, you've forsaken me. You've forsaken me. We see him, asking God to strike down his enemies, to kill his enemies' babies. Like, whoa, David, what's going on here? We see David in just tons of emotional throes. And what is David doing? Is he's laying this all out before God. He's laying it all out before God. We can, often get in a way of feeling as though, being it's seemingly as emotionally volatile as David is a bad thing. David, I don't believe that David was emotionally volatile, but what he was, and what is probably different than us, is that he was honest about his emotions. Is that he was honest about what was really going on inside him, or at least he wrote it down. For people to read for generations to come. David was honest about his emotions with God. And this is a pretty hard one for me to swallow. I think I'm very used to being strong, to being someone in a place of strength. My parents are hard workers, and they're very strong, and I get it a lot from them. My whole family came from Jamaica and had to make their own way in America, and they've done it, and they've done it and done it successfully. And they're strong people, and for me, emotion, or showing emotion, or letting someone know how I was really feeling, felt like weakness. It brought a lot of shame, because it felt like, oh man, I should be better. I should be stronger than this. And sometimes we can feel that way toward God. We can feel that way in our prayers toward God, like, oh man, I shouldn't be feeling the anger that I do about this pandemic, because this is, I should be better than this anger. Why am I feeling depressed? I'm a Christian. This is, I'm watching Netflix all day. Why am I depressed? And we don't bring these things to God, because we perceive them to be weakness. We perceive them to be something that we should be better than this. We see it in David's case, the exact opposite. David brings his complaints to God. He says, I cry aloud to God. I lift up my voice to God for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him I tell my trouble. David knew where to put his trouble. For me, it's easy to take my trouble and the emotional trouble that I feel, and just kind of shovel it down and be like, all right, I'm gonna shovel, I'm gonna shove through this one. I'm gonna read enough scripture. I'm gonna have a great enough attitude, and it's just gonna go away. David, on the other hand, was, all right, I'm bringing my trouble straight to God. I'm bringing my trouble to the being that can help me in my trouble. David was not shy about letting God know about what was going on inside of him. He was not shy. He felt no shame. You read the Psalms and you'll realize that David felt very little shame about telling God what was going on. He said some crazy things. He felt very little shame about it. And I think for us, it might do us some good to feel a little less shame about bringing our true emotions to God. Might do us more good to feel less shame about our emotions, especially in this time, especially when there's a lot of things going around that can cause a lot of emotions. There's obviously a pandemic, going on outside. If we don't have it ourselves, we probably know someone that does have it. Or did have it, or someone that's out on the front lines, working in hospitals to help quell it. There's some connection to it. There's lost jobs, there's lost wages, there's temporary layoffs. There's, you read the newspapers and the New York Times, the Washington Post, or whatever, you'll quickly go into a depression, because this is how the world ends, right? There's a lot going on. They can cause a lot of emotions, a lot of negative emotions. And where can we go with these negative emotions? We can't go anywhere else outside of our house. Where do we go? We have to go to God in prayer. We have to be like David and go to God in prayer. And the other thing that we see in David here, in verse 2, or in verse 3, excuse me. It says, when my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way. It is the path where I walk. People have hidden a snare for me. Look and see, there is no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. I cry to you, Lord. I say you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. You know, David was one not ashamed of carrying his emotions to God, but he also knew that God was the source of his perseverance. He knew that God was the only one that one could hear him and understand him without any judgment or shame, the one that could fix his issues. And not even fix his issues, but be a refuge for him to hide. You know, this is, you know, we're in the time of great uncertainty. That cannot be said enough, of great uncertainty. And when we feel a lot of things, when we feel a lot of emotions all at one time, we need places to hide. And where David goes is, yes, David is here hiding in a cave, but where does he go to hide? Is he hides in God. He hides in the fact that God is hearing him. He can hide within the fact, with you knowing that God is hearing him out, and that God is on his side. That God is the one that is working for him. That God is the one protecting him. You know, the reality is, we haven't gotten any reports of anyone in the Cleveland church that's been infected with COVID-19, and without a doubt, that is God protecting us. You know, God being on our side. You know, there's reports of job loss and wage loss, and just a lot of scary things happening. And where can we go? Where can we hide? Where can we lay out our feelings and know that someone is listening? It's to God. It's to God in deep and vulnerable prayer. And that's what David shows us, is that David is showing us, even in the wilderness, even when his life is literally on the line. His life is literally on the line. He can go to God. He feels no shame to bring all of his emotions, just to kind of throw up to God. And he knows that God is on his side, that God is listening, that God is his refuge, the place where he can hide from the rest of the world. A place where he can hide from the troubles, knowing that God is on his side. You know, I think this is a lesson that is easy to hear but hard to digest, just because this is so countercultural to the world that we live in, right? We're supposed to be, not stoic, but our emotions are, we deal with our emotions ourselves. We don't give them to anyone else. They stay inside of us, and that's what a strong person looks like. We find a way to deal with them. And where do we hide in society? We can hide in a myriad of different ways. We hide in Netflix, we hide in television and entertainment, or we hide in addiction, we hide in relationships. The lesson that David can teach us is so countercultural. Is so reverse of what the world thinks. But this is the way that David not only survived within the wilderness, but he thrived. The way he was able to grow closer to God in the wilderness was because he poured out his true emotions, his true feelings to God, and he hid there. He knew that he knew within his heart that God was taking care of him, that God was on his side, that God would deliver him, and that God was sheltering him. And so at the end of each Wilderness Wednesday, I have a short practical to take with us for, kind of in the coming week to kind of put this lesson into practice for us. And the practical for this one is to write out a prayer list. And if you're a regular church goer, this is it's not going to be your ordinary prayer list. This prayer list is going to consist of some of the most vulnerable feelings that you feel. And in this case, I would keep this prayer list, to if you're not comfortable sharing, then don't share it, and have this prayer list be yours, but lay out the most vulnerable things that you feel, lay out the raw emotions that you feel about this time, about the pandemic, whatever's going on, your job loss, whatever's going on, sickness, whatever it may be. But lay it out on this prayer list and have a time to have a time alone, whether it's in a closet in your house or you're going on a walk in a park. Remember to stay 6 feet away from someone, but if you're going on a walk, but have a time to pray vulnerably, to pray about the emotions that you may be feeling, to pray about the situations that you may be feeling in the most honest terms. Not in super religiously type terms. If you read the Book of Psalms, you can go to the Book of Psalms and draw some helpful words from David, because David's just laying it all out there. But pray vulnerably. Pray vulnerably about the emotions and situations in your heart and lay them out before God. You can do this once or twice. I encourage everyone to write out a list just so you know what you're going to pray for, and to pray vulnerably about these things. I believe that hopefully our quarantine is coming to an end soon. Prayerfully, our quarantine is coming to an end soon. But in the meantime, we need a refuge and a shelter and a hiding place for all the things that are going on inside of our hearts. And that place is going to be God for us. And that place can always be God. Amen. Amen.